Welcome to Night Talks, the University of Florida College of Journalism and Communications talk show produced by students for you. I'm Manuela Chatelima, a first-year student studying journalism, and our guest today is Wendy Crites Wacker, a CJC alum who is a global corporate and marketing communications leader currently working with Surgence Communications Strategies. Hi, Wendy. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's great to be back.
You earned bachelor degrees in public relations and English. What drew you to PR?
It was very interesting. So many of us in the profession call public relations kind of a found major because we find our way to it through another avenue. I came to University of Florida as an English major because I was a good writer and I liked to read. And when I started in my junior year, I started to think about what am I going to do with this after I actually graduate college. And I had a semester where I started taking a bunch of different classes just to try and explore what else was out there. And at the encouragement of my mom and my grandfather, I took an intro to mass communications class, thinking maybe I could write it for a magazine or something like that. And I loved it. Everything was very natural and intuitive for me, and I started realizing that it wasn't necessarily for everyone, so I thought I might be onto something here. And I never looked back. It was the best decision I could have made for my career.
But what made you go to PR instead of other communication areas?
I think mostly because of the writing, and I also liked the strategy around it. I liked, the strategic communications, being involved in corporations and things like that. So,
how did your time at UF prepare you for industry, and what were your career aspirations while you went to UF?
One of the factors that weighed on my decision to get an additional bachelor's degree in public relations was I was so impressed with the College of Journalism and Communications of how the entire curriculum in the entire college is geared toward developing you for your future career. It's very professionally oriented, career oriented, so bringing back alumni, bringing back people in the profession to talk to you about here's what a day in the life of being a journalist, an advertising person, a communications person, this is what this is going to look like. So I think this college prepares its students very well. I will say I've now been out for 30 years. I have hired countless UF-CJC alums and other alums from other universities and programs. And I can always tell. When someone has come from UF. Their skills are sharper right out of the box. They do know what what to expect in a professional setting right away. Their writing skills are on point. So this university does an excellent job of preparing their students to be professionals in the world.
That's good to know. In 1996, you began working for Meridian Behavioral Healthcare and the Chris Collinsworth Foundation as Resource Development and Public Relations Coordinator. So what types of activities and campaigns were you involved in at the time?
It was very interesting as a student here and getting ready to graduate. You kind of think you know what you want, and I said, I'll do anything except for I don't want to work for a nonprofit and I don't want to work for healthcare. And I didn't really have any reasons for that. It was some perception that I had, but I wanted to do an internship that gave me some more experience in running corporate events. So I was paired up with Casey Smith, who is probably the best first boss you could ever hope to have. And she was the development director for Meridian Behavioral Healthcare. And we put on, at that time, one of the largest events in town, which was the Chris Collinsworth Benefit Classic, to raise money for Meridian. Chris Collinsworth, many people know, as an announcer for the NFL. He was actually a Gator, wide receiver for the Florida Gators, was drafted for the Cincinnati Bengals. So the premise of that was running a large-scale event where we brought back former Florida football players and athletes who had gone on to the NFL like Chris. And corporate sponsors would come and play golf with them. So through that, I got to gain a wealth of experiences, and I have told a lot of students since then, don't count out anything really when you're getting started. Make sure that you're getting that experience, because if I had been, so staunch, I don't want to be at a nonprofit, that was the best thing that I could have done, because when you're at a nonprofit, you have a small staff. It was just me and Casey and like 6 to 8 interns a semester. I wrote all of the stories, I did the interviews, I laid out the newsletters, I laid out the brochures and everything that we did for the events. I managed interns during the events. I got so many different experiences in that first job that, if I had just gone to an agency at the time and just wrote press releases, I wouldn't have gotten the wealth of experience that I started with. That just gave me a great foundation and a variety of experiences. So check out those nonprofits.
And in 2000, you then started at Regeneration Technologies, Inc. as a manager for internal communications. Tell us about that organization and what internal communications consisted of.
They had gone from a very small company in Alachua, Florida, 20 minutes up the road, to being this publicly held company that was traded on the NASDAQ, again, within the hay bales of Alachua, Florida. And they had never had a formal internal communications program. And when you are working for a publicly held company, there's a lot of rules and regulations around how you can communicate, including internally. For example, Regulation Fair Disclosure says that you have to, any investor or potential investor, you have to share information to everyone at the same time. So when we sent out a press release or sent out any sort of news about the company, we would have to send it out over the wire first and tell our employees pretty much at the same time. We couldn't give our employees a heads up at first. So very big change for what was just a small company just a little bit before. So I developed and created the company's first formal internal communications program. Did a lot of research and focus groups with employees and leaders, figured out how to structure an internal communications program that would be sensitive to all the different employees and get them the information they needed. It was also very interesting because in that type of company, it was a company that prepared human donated tissue for transplantation, for medical procedures. Highly scientific, very advanced, very innovative. And so you had employees that were advanced degrees, had more letters behind their name than in their name, and were sitting at computers most of the time. And then you had people who were actually in the operations who were never at computers. So you had to have a very diverse program to make sure that when you have a message, you had to find different tools and different assets to get that message to people who work very differently across the company.
And then over the next few years, you became the director of corporate communications. How did your role evolve in this capacity?
Through that, we actually had done some mergers and acquisitions, and my team grew. The company grew, my team grew, my role grew. So that was the clear promotion, and really started taking all of the various programs and things that we had developed and put them all together in a corporate communications team. At that time also, I was handed responsibility for investor relations, which up to that point had been handled by the previous CFO. In this time we had had a leadership change and brought on, instead of the founding leadership team, we transitioned into a different leadership team who had familiarity with running a publicly held company. I tell all of younger professionals and students, be prepared, especially in this profession, especially in public relations and communications. You never know what's going to be handed to you next, whether it's crisis communications or another opportunity. Being in charge of investor relations was not on my radar in any way, shape, or form, but it was the responsibility was handed to me, and I said, okay, I'm going to learn how to do investor relations, and I did. Quickly and on the job. Ended up being very exciting and very instrumental in the development of the rest of my career.
Were you able to get like something from your previous experiences when you were learning about investor?
You need to be ever learning. You have to be ready to continually, continuous professional development. And that's a big, strong hallmark for me, is that you have to continue learning in this profession. You can't, everything about communications, professional communications, whether it's journalism, broadcasting, it has changed so much in the last 30 years, and it's going to change exponentially in the next 30 years. If you stagnate and don't continue to learn, you're going to get lost. We have to, as professionals, we have to continue to learn. So I used my continuous professional development mindset and reached out and got some resources like the National Investor Relations Institute and learned what I needed to know.
Regeneration Technologies Inc. became RTI Biologics Inc. and then eventually RTI Surgical. Talk about the evolution of this company and how you eventually became Vice President of Global Communications.
Those were major rebrand initiatives in a corporate sense, which really has played into what my career is today. Rebranding a corporation of those sizes is not for the faint of heart. It's more than just, we want to change our logo and we put on a new sign and we have new business cards and here we go. It is extremely comprehensive, especially when you're changing the name. Every single piece of paper, every single document, every single thing that you have as a company needs to be changed. And at one point when we were doing the RTI Surgical rebrand, one of my team members started collecting all of the various things that we needed to change and redo. And we had the 11 by 17 pieces of paper. There were multiple pieces of paper in a spreadsheet that said, here's what this thing is, here's who's in charge of it, here's the deadlines, and when we're starting this and when we're ending this. It's comprehensive. It's more than you think it is. So I definitely advise companies that are considering rebrands, are you ready to make this investment and why?
In 2017, you founded your own consulting firm, Surgence Communications Strategies. What was your inspiration for launching this firm?
I call myself the accidental consultant because I kept telling people I would be advised you should open a consulting firm because you've had to do just about everything there is to do in communications at this point, from crisis communications to investor relations. We even had a proxy contest and I ran the defense team for that from a communications standpoint. And so, and I said, I don't want to be a consultant. And I had a couple of opportunities and they just didn't feel right. And in that same time, with the leadership change, there were pieces of RTI that were being divested and sold off. And the cardiothoracic division was one of the first ones. And the vice president, the former vice president, called me one day and we connected and he said, Wendy, all of the stuff that you just rebranded to RTI Surgical for us, you did such a great job. He said, now I'm over here with this other company that just bought this, and they tacked on 2 other companies. So it was a private equity that bought that division from RTI, 2 other companies, renamed it, put it together, and he said, I have my biggest trade show of the year for my biggest audiences coming up in January. We usually do a national sales meeting during that time frame, and I have to rebrand everything and get a new booth and everything, and put together this sales meeting, and we had about 90 days. And I said, okay, let's do it. I'm up for a challenge, let's do it. I'm not doing anything else at the moment, so we rebranded. Now, fortunately, it was one product line, relatively small, but we rebranded that entire company, brand new booth, put together a sales meeting to launch the new brand, everything within 90 days. And I told them, I said, I think this is a land speed record. Let's not do this again. That was a challenge, but we did it, and it went off very well. And from that time, I have never advertised. I've had people that used to work with me at RTI at various times, or in other previous client companies, come back and say, you know what, you used to always do this, whether it's we want to make sure we might have a crisis comm situation on our hands. Can you prepare us and make sure that we don't, or that we are prepared in the case that we do? A lot of it is rebranding. We just acquired a company, and we're grappling with, do we rename, do we not, do we change our logo, do we not, and taking them through that.
That's incredible. So now, can you describe the types of services you offer your clients, and do you have any specific examples of success stories?
We, these days you hear a lot of the terminology fractional CMO or fractional, marketing. And I kind of reflected on that, and I said, I guess that's kind of what I do, is I will work, kind of inside, outside the company and provide that input. And it can be scaled to where I can go temporarily inside the company and set up a program, set up the processes and strategies that they need to support the overall goals of the company, or I can just do a rebranding or an event, manage trade shows and sales meetings that will fit in with the strategy of the overall company. So it really varies. I literally have had people just call me and say, we might have a crisis comm situation. We're hoping not, but can you review some of the communications that we have in draft form and just let us know, hey, you might consider this, or I'm really good at looking down the road because I've been there and done that so many times. So I will look at it and say, think about this, think about this, think about this. So that's been my portfolio really for the past few years, is kind of pulling on everything that I did for the first 25 years of my career and applying it to people in my network who need help.
And how do you approach building a unified brand voice, either for a client or a company you're working for?
That is very, very key, and something that, we had talked about. It goes more than just, hey, let's change our logo and we're done. There's so much more to it, and it goes so much deeper. Your brand is not just the physical manifestation of a logo or, what you put on there. It goes deeper into how do you show up in your marketplace? How do you show up to your customers? How, when someone, whether it's a customer, a potential customer, a vendor, a person from the community, when they interact with somebody from your company, what is the feeling that they walk away with? What are the types of, community relations types of organizations do you support? All of those things, all are little pieces of a recipe that that indicates how you show up in your marketplace, how you're perceived in the marketplace.
You've been involved with professional organizations like Florida Public Relations Association and the National Investor Relations Institute. How have these networks supported your career development, and what role do they play with young professionals?
So we do not have enough time in the day for me to talk about how important professional development is and what that has done. And it's something that I talk to a lot of young professionals about. Don't skimp on that. Don't skimp on networking and professional development. Do not. The National Investor Relations Institute I got involved in because it gave me the resources that I needed to learn about investor relations in a time where I had not had that training previously. And I would not have been able to do my job appropriately had I not been able to avail myself of those resources. I am finishing up my year of immediate past president of Florida Public Relations Association. Last year I was president, a statewide president. I have been on the executive committee and leadership of the local chapter my entire career. As soon as I started my first job, I signed up to be a member of the Florida Public Relations Association, and it has been instrumental in my career. I've talked about how I utilize my network for my agency. After that first job, I didn't have to interview for any other company since then. I was invited to apply because somebody knew my skills already through my volunteer work through Florida Public Relations Association. So when I run into students or young professionals and they say, I just don't have time, I'm so busy, I can't spend time volunteering. And I would say, well, where are you going to get your next job? How are you networking and helping people understand who you are and what you bring to the table and what kind of professional you are if you're not participating in some way? Continuous professional development in our profession, you can't be successful without it. You just can't. And even when you really get, a lot of experience in public relations, communications, journalism, etc., you're going to start to hopefully move into leadership roles. That's what we all aspire to. And as you start getting into leadership roles, you're going to have to know other things outside of just our profession. You're going to have to understand managing budgets. You're going to have to understand, if you are fortunate enough to get around an executive table and working directly and counseling CEOs and CFOs and being a part of a C-suite, you have to understand how an organization works, how a business works, whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit, publicly held, privately held. There are ways that businesses function and operate to be healthy. And if you don't know any of that and what your piece fits in to that, you're not going to be very successful. So we have to continue to learn and develop those portions of us. You're getting, in the university, you're getting this foundation of learning, and you have to continuously build upon that.
That's amazing. So what keeps you passionate about communication, especially in such a long career where so many things have changed, and what drives you to continue growing and adapting?
I think the thing that I love about this career and this profession is that it is changing so much. We've talked about how much things have changed in the 30 years since I sat in these classrooms and walked through these buildings as a student. And it's going to continue to change. And I think that's what's exciting, and that it keeps it fresh and new. This profession does not stagnate at all, and you have to really keep up. So I think that keeps me motivated. But also, I really think that what we do from a communication standpoint is critical to organizations, critical to companies. It's critical to society. Journalism and putting out trustworthy information from a company standpoint, of making sure that people have the information that they need to do their jobs, to live their lives, to make educated decisions, I think is critical. It's kind of up there with food and water and air to breathe. If you don't have information, if you don't have the right information to make educated decisions and informed decisions, it's very difficult to make the right decisions.
What advice do you have for anyone interested in going into the public relations field?
So many times we go through these ebbs and flows where people say, I want to go into public relations because I'm a people person, because I like people. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I would say if you're not a people person, then that's okay too, because what is critical in this profession is making sure that you can write and communicate clearly. I call what we do translation sometimes. We are taking, from the example of corporate communications, we're taking information and messaging from the C-suite, from scientists and R&D, research and development scientists, and we are looking at it and thinking about, okay, how can I translate this so it's understandable to employees, to my various audiences, to surgeons, to legislators, and I put together these different communications tools to filter the right message to the right audience so they all get it in a way that's understandable to them, but is consistent to what the original message was. So if you can be very strategic and you can be a good translator and are not afraid to continuously learn, then this is a great profession for you.
Thank you for your insight, Wendy. Your career is amazing, so inspiring, and all your advice. I'm certain it will be very useful for everyone, for me and for everyone at CJC. So thank you so much. And thank you, our viewers, for joining us. Until next time, and good night.